Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you think Homer's Odyssey is just some ancient poem about a guy sailing around the Mediterranean fighting monsters, you are in for a huge surprise. We're talking about a foundational text of Western literature that is secretly a profound, totally raw exploration of human nature. So what does it actually mean to find your way home? It sounds like a simple question, right? But it's literally the massive anchor for our entire journey today. It elevates the whole story from just a dusty catalog of ancient monsters into this timeless reflection on the human experience. As we track the legendary king of Ithaca, Odysseus, we aren't just mapping coordinates on a sea, we're mapping the lengths a person will go to reclaim their life after a truly devastating war. To figure that out, we're going to need a map of our own for this explainer. We'll kick things off with the mythic foundation, brave a journey of temptations, look at the struggle at home, witness reclaiming the throne, and finally unpack the enduring legacy of this absolute masterpiece. All right, Section 1, the mythic foundation. After the Trojan War. You got to start at the beginning, right? The Greeks just defeated Troy, largely thanks to the strategic brilliance of our deeply flawed protagonist, Odysseus. He's the guy traditionally credited with that famous Trojan horse strategy. With the victory secured, you'd probably assume he gets a nice, easy victory lap all the way back to his homeland of Ithaca. Well, reality check. See that number 10? That is 10 agonizing, brutal years it takes Odysseus just to get back to Ithaca. What should have been a relatively straightforward voyage totally transforms into a decade-long struggle. A full decade of being completely lost at sea, battling supernatural events, and facing down the wrath of the gods. And here's the kicker about Odysseus. What makes him such a legendary, epic hero isn't that he's perfect. Not even close. Sure, he is incredibly intelligent, strategic, courageous, and super resourceful. But man, he is also extremely proud, sometimes deceptive, and honestly, pretty reckless. His overconfidence, it's going to cost him dearly. Moving on to Section 2, a journey of temptations, psychological tests. Because now we get to see how this brilliant but deeply flawed guy handles the impossible. See, every mythical encounter out there on the water is actually a brutal psychological test of his character. Just look at his famous run-in with Polyphemus, the Cyclops. They're trapped in this monster's cave, and Odysseus proves that brain power absolutely crushes brute strength. He pulls off this snappy four-step heist. He cleverly tells the Cyclops his name is Nobody, blinds the monster, and then he and his surviving men escape by literally hiding under the bellies of the Cyclops' own sheep. It's a total masterclass in strategy. But remember that pride we talked about? He ruins the whole thing by shouting his real name as he sails away, which brings a terrible curse down on his ship. It's a perfect example of the crazy psychological hurdles he has to jump. Take Circe, an enchantress who literally turns his crew into pigs. He has to learn when to resist her temptation and eventually when to swallow his pride and accept her help. Then there's the underworld, where he speaks with the prophet Tiresias and fallen heroes. He actually has to confront death and human mortality just to gain some self-understanding. And, of course, the sirens. To survive their deadly but beautiful song, he has his crew plug their ears with wax, but he has them physically tie him to the ship's mast. He recognizes his own weakness and actually creates a system to control his own impulses. But here's the thing. Sometimes self-control just isn't enough. When he's faced with Scylla and Charybdis, we see this agonizing truth about leadership. Sometimes you just have to make incredibly difficult decisions where absolutely no option is safe. On one side, you have Scylla, this multi-headed monster snatching up sailors. On the other, Charybdis, a gigantic whirlpool that will destroy the entire ship. Odysseus has to choose the lesser danger. It's a heartbreaking burden for any leader to carry. And that brings us to the ultimate test of consequences. Picture this. His starving crew completely ignores his direct warnings and eats the sacred cattle of Helios, the sun god. Zeus destroys their ship in retaliation, leaving Odysseus as the sole survivor. He washes up on the island of Calypso, who offers him love, comfort, and literally eternal life. But he rejects immortality. Why? Because for Odysseus, true belonging and a meaningful life matter way more than perfect comfort. He just wants to go home. All right, Section 3, the struggle at home. Meanwhile, in Ithaca. Because here's a crucial piece of the puzzle. While Odysseus is out there battling monsters and rejecting immortality, we have to look at the parallel path happening back on his home island. We actually have two incredible journeys happening at the exact same time. You've got the father's physical struggle for survival across this violent sea, juxtaposed right against his young son, Telemachus, and his internal search for confidence and identity. Telemachus grew up without his dad. Now he's watching these greedy suitors consume his family's wealth and disrespect his home. He's got to figure out how to step up and be a leader before his father's legacy is completely erased. And we absolutely cannot talk about Ithaca without talking about one of the most brilliant minds in this entire epic, his wife Penelope. She isn't just passively waiting around playing the victim, she is fiercely, actively protecting her home. When these suitors pressure her to choose a new husband, she agrees, but says she has to finish weaving a burial shroud for her father-in-law first. Her brilliant tactic? She weaves it all day and then secretly unravels her work every single night. With that one clever trick, she delays these entitled, abusive men for years. I mean, she is every bit as strategic as Odysseus. Which brings us to the climax of our explainer. Section 4, Reclaiming the Throne. Return to Ithaca. This is it, the moment the physical and psychological journeys violently collide as Odysseus finally, after 20 long years away, sets foot on the shores of his homeland. But remember, Odysseus is the ultimate strategist. He knows he can't just waltz through the front door. He's completely outnumbered by these greedy suitors. So instead, he becomes the disguised king. He returns to his own palace dressed as a beggar. This lets him quietly observe his household, watch the total disrespect of the suitors, and determine exactly which of his servants and family members are actually still loyal to him. Reclaiming his home isn't just about unlocking a door. It requires completely reclaiming his authority. And the tension just builds and builds until it finally snaps during a contest set up by Penelope. She challenges the suitors. Whoever can string Odysseus' massively heavy bow and shoot an arrow through a series of axes wins. These pampered suitors completely fail. They can't even bend the wood to string it. But then, the disguised beggar steps up. He effortlessly strings the weapon, nails the challenge, and in this breathtaking moment, drops the disguise. He and Telemachus violently defeat the men who abuse their home. Justice is served, and order is finally restored. Wow. Okay, which brings us to our final stop, Section 5, the enduring legacy, universal themes. Let's take a step back and synthesize all of this, because there's a reason this ancient text, passed down through oral storytelling and finally written in ancient Greek, is still an absolute mirror to our modern lives today. Because this story expertly weaves together these deeply universal human experiences. We're talking homecoming, identity, loyalty, consequences, and temptation. Whether it's the 8th century BC or literally today, we all grapple with finding out who we are, proving our loyalty, resisting temptation, and figuring out what it really means to be home. The Odyssey is this powerful reminder that pride and recklessness always catch up to you, and that our choices for sure ultimately shape our destiny. There's this fantastic quote that says, Odysseus' greatest journey is not simply across the sea. It is the journey toward understanding who he is, what he values, and where he belongs. And honestly, that perfectly hits the nail on the head for this explainer. The whole geographical voyage is entirely secondary to this monumental internal human quest of self-discovery. He traveled to the edges of the earth, outsmarted gods, but his greatest triumph was figuring out what he truly valued. So I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to kind of turn the lens back on your own life as you navigate your own epic journey. If you were Odysseus, which challenge would be the absolute most difficult for you and why? Would it be resisting the temptation of Calypso's perfect comfort? The terrifying impossibility of choosing between Scylla and Charybdis? Or maybe having the sheer patience to walk into your own home disguised as a beggar? Think about that as you chart your own path forward. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.